Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good vibes, good energy, good people. It's your boy Mickey Fenty, aka Mickey Made It. If you're new to this channel, you know what to do to this channel. Subscribe right now. Also, if you want to support my brand, it's inspiredbydreams.shop, and that's the place to go to get your drip on. We have a lot of new hoodies, a lot of new drops that you guys can dress outside of the box. Okay, now today's conversation. I've been researching this for a while now, and just to get everything together to bring to you guys to have a better understanding of what's going on and how society is heading downhill. You see a lot of people, maybe not with the most smartest of education, making the most money on social media. But what happens is, in these times, being that social media is the lead to a lot of people's, it plays a big part in people's decisions on an everyday basis. But we don't ever understand is what happens if everybody thinks like this. What happens if everybody says, you know what, I know I could be a doctor, but let me just do this social media, and if this takes off, I'm gonna end up with the same amount of money. What would happen in society or the world we live in today? And in this conversation with these intelligent people with different opinions, it covers that. So you guys, this is an important conversation, and for you guys that are very intelligent, I would definitely want you guys to stay tuned, because we have a lot more conversations like this and have some kind of understanding of it, and use this. Let's get it.
Mickey made it. Mickey made what you made, Mickey. You know how hard it is to be around stupid people? To hear the conversation and dialogue of stupid people. How they rationalize information in the dumbest way. How they draw conclusions and then go find.
Real quick, social media, a lot of people are selling fake intelligence, just meaning that they're providing information and they're just giving it to their audience, knowing that their audience are just there to follow whatever they're saying or just there to be entertained. But then the more they put it into their audience, it doesn't necessarily mean just because you have a big following that the information is correct. I see a lot of bad information being dished out to people that don't even know the difference.
Other dumb people to agree with them. You can't tell me that don't piss you off. My therapist, Erica Little, she's in Fort Worth, Texas, if you want to look her up, told me that highly intelligent people suffer from a mild form of depression because they daily have to quantify the stupidity of others. This woman of God don't even know how heavy that statement was. Do you know how mentally exhausting it is to be around stupid people? And then you got to interact with them at work. I would love for you to give your testimony about how you had to deal with a dumb individual in the comment section.
I feel like I'm in the mood to stir the pot today and in the mood to make some people mad. So let's get into it. I think this whole movement of the anti-intelligence is because y'all were obsessed with STEM. It's because y'all were so obsessed with STEM education that we are in this anti-intelligence revolution right now. How, Alyssa? How can you say that? Like, the STEM field is so much. Absolutely. But when you start saying that certain subjects such as history, literature, English language arts, reading, whatever you want to call it, arts, are not valuable, not worthy, but pump a whole bunch of STEM education into schools, into programs, funding, what you end up getting is you get people who probably can read the data but don't know how to apply data, right? Because you don't know how to comprehend data. What you get is people who do not read, so they don't build empathy, they don't build comprehension. You get people who turn away history, so they ignore patterns, human behaviors, things like that. They don't take it seriously. And I think it's because we kept prioritizing STEM education. prepared for y'all to be upset in my comments, fully prepared for y'all to be stitching and calling me all types of whatevers, but I stand on what I say.
The lack of cultivation of the arts in subjects outside of STEM in America is not what caused anti-intellectualism. That is actually an effect of repeated cycles of anti-intellectualism in America, because anti-intellectualism in America is woven into the very foundation of what this nation was built on. The earliest ideas of the American dream have sown within them the potential for anti-intellectualism. You guys know I'm trained in the discipline of history, so of course I have to bring out a history classic called Anti-Intellectualism in American Life, which was written by Richard Hofstadter in 1963, which basically talks about how everything we're seeing right now, we've already seen before. So let's get into it, starting off with a quote. Anti-intellectualism was not manifested in this country for the first time during the 1950s. Our anti-intellectualism is in fact older than our national identity and has a long historical background. An examination of this background suggests that regard for intellectuals in the United States has not moved steadily downward and has not gone into sudden recent decline, but is subject to cyclical fluctuations. It suggests too that the resentment from which the intellectual has suffered in our time is a manifestation not of a decline in his position, but of his increasing prominence. Let's break what that means down. So what you really need to take away from that quote to really make all of this make sense is that anti-intellectualism exists because of a tension between this foundational idea of the American dream and this rise in prominence of the intellectual. So now we're going to break down what the American dream is before we tie in the rise of the intellectual to make it all come together. So firstly, in the original American populistic dream, the omnipresence of the common man was fundamental and indispensable. It was believed that he could, without much special preparation, this meaning without much formal training, without much formal obstacle at all, pursue the professions and run the government. So this whole idea that America was built on is that you can succeed with no, we not gonna stop your swag. Like, you can do what you want to do and we're not gonna impose on you, right? So what changed? Oh, the rise in prominence of the intellectual. So let's get into what Hofstadter says about this. One reason why anti-intellectualism has changed in our time is that our sense of impracticality of intellect has been transformed. During the 19th century, when business criteria dominated American culture almost without challenge, and when most business and professional men attained eminence without much formal education, academic schooling was said to be useless. It was assumed that schooling existed not to cultivate certain distinctive qualities of the mind, but to make personal advancement possible. So this is where we get the issue of anti-intellectualism and where our cycle really starts and kicks off at. Because essentially, the rise in prominence of the intellectual speaks to this major shift in who and how somebody could succeed in America. It used to just be that you didn't necessarily need a formal education to succeed, and therefore formal education was useless, because in America, the primary thing that this country focuses on is personal advancement, on success. It was never on the cultivation of the arts, of cultivating a well-rounded, super thoroughly minded population. It was on a population who could be successful, all within their own individual merits. So when we see this rise of the intellectual, that comes with an introduction of formal requirement. That comes with now an imposing on this idea of the American dream and this free-for-all of like, oh, anybody who wants to succeed here can and do so easily. Like, that is where anti-intellectualism really starts to build. And we can really see this play out in the modern day, because even intellectuals who are within the disciplines, like STEM disciplines, are not respected. Like, they are also subjected to anti-intellectualism, because anti-intellectualism in America is against all intellectualism. It is all subjects. And we see that with the rejection of science. We see that with the rejection of, healthcare professionals, of people who are in hard science disciplines that, you would think are important, that we learn in school, are the only things relevant for you to know, because those are the disciplines that make the most money. Because at the end of the day, it all circles back to personal advancement. And in America, personal advancement and this concept are very tied to personal capital. How much you are able to achieve, how much you are able to gain. So historically, this pattern that we see of anti-intellectualism, how it's developed and how it's ebbed and how it's grown, it didn't just start with America saying, no, we're only going to teach math and science and physics. It was deeper than that. Anti-intellectualism as a movement is this tension between the foundation of what this country is built on and the evolution and what our current society is. And that is why it will continue repeating. So I'm not going to get on my whole historical soapbox right now, but I will definitely make a longer video about this on YouTube. So check that out. But yeah, long story short, if you're interested in more on this topic, anti-intellectualism in American life breaks it down beautifully. Because anti-intellectualism in America, way bigger than lack of cultivation of the arts. That is actually an effect of repeated and very vicious anti-intellectualism.
There's a creator out here talking about how the hyperfixation on STEM has led to anti-intellectualism, and she is 100% correct. I have a bachelor's in anthropology and a master's in biomedical informatics, Anthropology is like the liberal arts of the sciences and the sciences of the liberal arts. One day you're focused on ethnography and cultural studies. The next day it is evolution. Biomedical informatics is data, but all towards healthcare. It requires a whole lot of nuance, and unfortunately, a lot of the folks that are in these programs and going into informatics do not understand the nuances of American healthcare. In my program, the majority of students were foreign from countries that focus on STEM. So think China, Korea, India, etc. And the majority of them had no type of grasp of American healthcare. Also, I need more Black and Hispanic folks to go into informatics because the folks who are making these programs and the healthcare that's going to affect you hate you. But that's off topic. One of my Chinese classmates decided that his project was going to be looking at healthcare outcomes in Houston, and he was going to use Houston Methodist as his source of data for his data model. Houston Methodist. I looked at him like, what? The professor was also like, what? But she saw my face and she was like, Cheryl, what do you think? What? Explain it. So here I am having to explain to him the social determinants of healthcare because he does not understand the nuance behind medicine in the United States. He does not understand that the president, the Bushes, go to Houston Methodist. They are not the same types of people that go over to Ben Taub and LBJ, where they have to treat people who live in poverty, people who are underinsured, uninsured, undocumented, where they literally have to have a food drive to bring down obesity and diabetes rates. Like, he's not understanding that you can't take data from one of the best hospitals in the state and apply it to the entire city. Like, you just can't do that. He had no idea what was going on. And I'm sitting here like, where's the nuance? Like, is that not common sense? Because on one hand, I have an anthropology degree. I totally understand culture. I understand how these things work. I've had to write 18-page papers over a concept, over a topic, over a theory, like, and they're not even comprehending past data. Like, this is how we end up with so much bias in our healthcare, so much bias in our algorithms and our AI, because the people who are programming them don't understand you. They don't understand us. They don't understand our country. They don't understand any of this shit. It's kind of crazy. Like, their hyper focus is just on the data. It's just on the numbers. They can't actually interpret it. They can't apply it. I was shocked, and she's 100% correct. She was not wrong because I was on the applied side of the program. So they would make the two of us interact all the time so that we could be like, hey, I know what you want to do, but that's not possible. Have you looked at this? Do you understand the patient population? No.
He framed the idea of being educated as a war between snobby liberal
people outside of the United States, particularly in Europe or other Western countries, tend to wonder why the United States is so deeply anti-intellectual, so undereducated. It's because our educational system was designed to cater to the elite. It was never something that working class people were ever supposed to have equal access to. Public schools in the United States are funded by property taxes. That in and of itself creates an elitist system where people with more money, their children, will be better educated than the children of people who do not have a lot of money. Public universities are free in most of the Western world. We are one of the few Western countries where public education is not free. We do not prioritize educating non-elites. Our whole system is built on maintaining this hierarchy in education, and it ensures that the electorate is much easier to manipulate.
Anti-intellectualism is on the rise, and here's why I think that's a bad thing. First of all, what do I mean by anti-intellectualism? I don't mean the critique of experts and the critique of people who have made being an intellectual their profession. What I mean is a kind of general sentiment that directs anger or mockery against people who read, people who write, people who enjoy critique and conversation. And I've noticed this general trend online that to admit that you like reading or writing, or that you have an interest in art or poetry or cinema, or anything that isn't immediately related to the incentive structure of the pursuit of greater financial freedom or wealth, is thereby rendered suspicious. And the reason it's rendered suspicious is because the powerful have a vested interest in not giving you the time to think. Because if you have the time to think, you have the time to question. And if you have the time to question, then you have the time to resist. And that thereby when we stop championing music and arts and theory and literature and critique, we've given in to the powerful. We've been lured into a false sense of complacency. And we think that it's the thinkers we have to worry about, when it's instead the powerful who want to keep us from expressing ourselves critically.
The rise of anti-intellectualism is extremely scary to me.
Like, I think it's weird how people don't want to be smart anymore, or don't seek learning about things that aren't about pop culture, who don't have any type of self-introspection, who call their friends know-it-alls when they start talking about the state of the world. Y'all are weird.
It's a hobby and not everyone critically thinks about every...
I think one of the reasons why anti-intellectualism is so big right now is because people have turned decolonizing or unpacking, theories and various studies to the extreme. So what I mean is people have taken the idea that, like, hey, these sciences, these theories, these social studies, these humanities are imbued with white supremacy. Totally, not a single one is unaffected by patriarchy, and we need to re-examine a lot of those views and come to different conclusions and add on to them, make them more complex, etc. People have taken that idea and have just been like, it's all BS. Like, it's all BS. This is why we shouldn't even listen to this old white guy's opinion. It doesn't even matter. So they're devaluing like centuries and millennia of work because they have taken this idea to the extreme, when in fact it's intellectualism to want to further analyze these pre-existing analyses, but instead people are just rejecting these prior analyses totally. And I think that strand of thinking is then woven with two other strands that are also affected by capitalism. One, it's the constant churning out and academiaization of everything. So this first strand is professors have very unstable jobs unless they're tenured. And in order to get tenured, they need to publish a lot of research. And when you're on a time crunch and you can only get job security if you get published, sometimes you just publish anything. So there's this overwhelming lack of quality almost in a lot of research. So that is making people undervalue academia, because they can sort of sense that the underlying sentiment of academia is, there's a lot of influence by big industry, there's a lot of influence by this rush to be published. And the second strand is that people have a hard time maintaining hobbies, especially hobbies that are related to passion and genuine interest. So hobbies which are not just cope and try to enjoy and forget about my 9-to-5 grind, because capitalism has imbued us with time poverty and just a sense of dread, and we are overwhelmed with information and traumatic instances. So I think those three things together, the wanting to decolonize, therefore undervaluing theories and research, especially philosophy, economic theory, whatever, which is also just another way of ignorance is bliss coping. The second part being academia being really pressured with publication, and the third part being not really having the energy and the mental resources to maintain passions outside of coping under capitalism. Those things, anti-intellectualism, bam.
Please remember, y'all, that one of the goals of anti-intellectualism is to convince the everyday person that getting the answer to a question is not important, and that asking the question within itself is not important, that whatever you know or whatever is presented to you at face value, that is what you should accept as reality. Because when these people go to Trump rallies, right, and they ask them questions, basic questions on American geography or history or things like that, right, and they get caught up and they look stupid, right? A lot of the times it's not that they're simply poorly educated in the sense that they haven't had a good education, but they have access to this knowledge, but they have been convinced that learning it isn't worth it. And so they end up rooting for something or being in support of something, and they have no idea what they're supporting. They just accept it as good and as reality.
It's not about being fake, it's about being smart. We're too busy trying to keep up with how we look or how it looks. Baby, you better keep up with what you know, because what you know will always override how you feel. My feeling says I don't like you, but my knowledge and my wisdom says I have to cooperate with you in order to get to where I need to get to. So guess what? It's not about how I feel. It's about me being smart and what I know.
Look, this conversation is deep, but one thing I do want to highlight in this conversation is You know, in these times, that's why I always tell you guys, you have to always take an understanding that intelligence is something that you work on every single day. And yes, we do see people that might not have degrees or a certain level of education, and they're making a certain amount of money, but it does not necessarily mean that without that financial literacy that's going to be, you know, good for them. It could be detrimental to many. And just having the resources without having the you know, the intelligence behind it, you're kind of like walking down a path of darkness. You don't know where you're headed. And I always tell people, you know, it's just like that good old saying, you know, a wise man can play the part of a stupid man, but a stupid man can't play the part of a wise man. In so many different ways it's been said. But the reason why that sits good with this conversation is because, you know, it's better to have the intelligence and learn learn new things before these obstacles are put in front of you, because the person that knows, you can play any part of that conversation. But if you don't know at all, then you're the fool in the conversation, because anything that's thrown at you, you really can't break it down or dissect it to see what it really is. So I would say, and through it all, no matter, don't mix the money with your education. When it comes to education, it's the discipline in it that you have to go through, that it takes, that you might not, you know, it might not be a pinpoint outlook of what you're going to do it in your future, but in conversations, that might be the same conversation about that particular class you went to might can get you in a certain place or get you with higher wages, depending on where your life is headed. So you guys let me know down below how you feel about this conversation. And yeah, man, social media has made people feel, a lot of people are dumbing down, but if we all thought with that type of low energy, low vibrational, low frequency mindset, where would we be all as a whole? You know, the world today. We wouldn't have doctors, lawyers. We'll just have everybody stuck on social media. So pay attention to what's going on and just have an understanding. It's not just about you, and you. It's about us, all of us, as a whole. Until next time, it's your boy Mickey Fenty, aka Mickey Made It. If you're new to this channel, you know what to do to this channel. Subscribe.